Mic. Camera. Action.
Come again?
Sure deal.
There's gonna be some left over for you. I take care of my boys.
That's not the point, Charlie.
You feeling bad about Jimmy? Have him tell you the size of the mordida they took out of his hide when you run a place on the other side. Those old boys from Ciudad Leon.
I'm not picking it up.
You do whatever I say you do, or else you put it on the trail, son.
Well, how about this, Charlie? How about you lay that shield on this table and vanish before you end up dead or in jail?
You're not making sense, buddy.
You stick around and I'm bringing up charges on the county road project. 2/3 of that money went straight into your pocket.
You're being mighty careless with your mouth, son.
You ever shoot a man who's looking you in the eye, Charlie?
All right. Welcome back to Filmography, the show dedicated to watching every credited film from an actor's complete back catalogue from past AB through to present day in chronological order. Each episode, I'm joined by an esteemed guest to watch and discuss the next entry from the Focus Filmography and consider how it ranks amidst their career and whether we can trace any typecasting trends or topic traits or theatrical tics. Today's guest is the Sheriff of the Unsung, Spider-Dan. Today's film is John Sayles Lone Star from 1996. We watch, you listen, and hopefully watch along too. Good evening, sir, or good evening, Sheriff. Howdy, Sheriff, I should say.
Howdy. Yes, we're back again, back in the Lone Star state of Texas once again. Very different film from what we had last time. But we do have some connections, as I mentioned just before we start recording. Matthew McConaughey again is here in Texas, playing a very different character and a different amount of screen time, certainly. But also one of his family members, W.E. Slaughter, the actor who played his character, is back in this one in a very, very even smaller role than Matthew McConaughey has in this. So yeah, it's kind of almost like a weird sequel we've stumbled upon.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think we didn't even do this on purpose, did we? And with the idea of like Texas carrying on through. I mean, in season 1, I like to get people back. You were one of those for subsequent entries in the franchises. Maybe you need to be my like Texas state guy. Although you'd be on the show quite a lot, I would have thought probably, which I wouldn't mind because I love talking to you, as you know.
Yeah, I'm up for that. If you can find them, if they're all in Texas, if he has that, I imagine there's a few set in Texas. I'm going to imagine a few more, but I don't know how many more.
You have missed one already, of course, with Dazed and Confused.
Oh, of course, damn it!
So we've already broken up before it even started.
Oh well, next time we'll figure something out. We'll figure some sort of connections in. Mike was talking about it on my podcast that's just come out, all about all the connections we kept finding between stuff. So yeah, they're all there. They just need to be unearthed, much like this film.
Well, yeah, nice. I love that. A little segue you're doing for us there, because you have the honor of being the first guest back in season 2 as well. And yeah, you've always been a champion of the show, and I appreciate that from the very start. You were
I mean, you did it first for me, so you know.
Well, that's true. Yeah,
it's only fair. I repay the favor, and you did it for me much longer and have continued than I have. So I've got to put in a bit more extra time now. I'm going to put.
You're paying it forward, and I'll do a segue now. It's about linking the past to the present.
Oh,
we're on it tonight. We're on it.
Yeah, we are. Oh, digging it up. We're all digging it up. It's there's a lot to talk about with this one, I think, and hopefully, I mean, I've not listened to your most recent episodes that are yet to come out, but hopefully we've broken maybe this this chain that we've had, the kind of the poor quality content that Matthew's been putting out. Hopefully, this one can break that pattern for you. Fingers crossed.
Well, we'll certainly be discussing that as we get towards the end of the show. Yeah, absolutely. Like how bad of a run it's been. Good, it's not been good.
Yeah, it's been rough for you, and yeah, especially what was it? Boys on the Side, was that the one that's just come out?
Boys on the Side is the most recent release. Yeah, as we're recording. Yeah.
That was that was hard. I was like, "Fuck me!" I was glad I didn't choose that one. Jesus Christ!
And as Matt said, he was down initially, and then when I sort of was reading it, and I thought, "Oh, I love Matt. He's a great guy, and he would have done a great job recording that." But I thought I probably need a female voice on this one.
Yeah, I think so. But I think you got I think Rhea's perfect for this, and I think you need a really opinionated voice on those topics. I think you have to have a strong stance on those particular topics, and Rhea always has a strong stance on any and all of those topics. So yeah, I think absolutely you picked the right person for that particular podcast. Very entertaining, don't get me wrong, but yeah, I'm kind of glad I didn't decide to do that one, even though I am the sultan of shit. There are certain things I'm like, I'm good. I'm not going to go for that one.
I did try to promote you tonight, and thank you. I see that you appreciate that. Even promote to the Sheriff of the Unsung. So you know,
That'll do. Slight step up. Oh dear.
I mean, this one isn't without its issues, is it? Either. I mean, there's a lot for us to talk about here.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's trying to say a lot. It's trying to, that past to present is doing a lot of commentary about how the past affects current thinking and whether we can change to move forward. So we'll definitely get into that as we go. As we do, before we do that, do you want to try and give a brief synopsis
squash,
which is quite hard for this, I'd say, because it's not a complicated movie. It's pretty It's pretty easy to grasp what's happening, but what it does do is require you to pay attention all the way through, I would have said.
Oh yeah, it was. I watched it first thing, kind of Saturday morning over the weekend, and I had to, it was one of those where I was like, "Oh, I think I'm gonna have to pay attention to this. I'm gonna have to kind of glue myself, put the phone away, and just really kind of sit and focus on this." And again, it's a long one. It's a long one. It's not Chris's sweet spot by any stretch. It's definitely much longer than that. But yeah, it's basically a film about a sheriff in Texas. I think it's Frontier. I think the part of Texas is called. I'm not sure if that's a fictional one or a real one, but let's go with it.
I think it's made up from what I can tell, but
probably. But the idea is you've got Chris Cooper is the current sheriff in 1996, and his father was one of the previous sheriffs who ran the town. He's Sam Deeds, and McConaughey's character is Buddy Deeds, and he's like a local hero, local kind of gunslinger legend type character. Everyone has good things to say about him. There's all these different stories and different takes and things. Chris Cooper, Sam Deeds, has a very different take on him because he was the son, and we'll get into why there's that kind of distrust and uncomfortableness with his father and this being this golden god, saint-like hero. And what happens is by this army base they're decommissioning. Some of the army guys are doing like metal detection and stuff and looking for like fossils and all sorts of stuff. They come across a body with a mason's ring and a sheriff's star, and it turns out to be his father's predecessor. So he was his father's the deputy to Chris Christopherson's character, Charlie Wade, I want to say, his character's name. And he was known for being corrupt and racist and violent and all this other stuff. And we don't know what happened to him. He just disappeared one day. But now that they found this body, questions are being raised as to whether Buddy Deeds was as heroic as people said. And Chris Cooper's character, Sam, is kind of investigating, but it's almost like they kind of know who it is. And the main assumption is that Buddy did it, but he was if he did it, he had a reason for doing it, and there was a good person. But we do hear a lot of other kind of stories, and there's a huge cast of characters here. You've got some amazing actors that we've already mentioned. You've got Joe Morton, Elizabeth Pena, and various others that I'm drawing a blank on name wise. Huge kind of cast of characters, a lot of different kind of stories going on that kind of intersecting and are trying to say different things. It's not as focused as you think on the main thing, the body and the mystery. It's kind of there's not an immediacy to that investigation where I thought there would be, and I thought there'd be a focus on it. As I was saying before we recorded, it feels a bit more like a LA Confidential, or it's kind of stuff is happening, but it's more about the area and the town and how people are getting on. There's a lot of kind of racial tension. There's all these different groups, black, white, Latino, Latinx, all kind of mixing together, but it's all kind of there's an kind of tense little truce kind of going on, but there are problems and issues and stuff. But that's kind of the general plot of it. As we go through, we learn a bit more about the past, and they use this wonderful device where they don't actually. I was talking about this on a podcast I just did with Mike on my channel about transitioning from showing the past and the present and the way you do that. And in this film, they don't cut away or give you like a doodle-doo, 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 any of those kind of effects. They just literally pan the camera around, and it's in one shot, and you're in the past, which it says a lot about this film, because it is the present is just as important as the past, and that they've not 30 years has passed between these two sheriffs, but not that much has really changed, which I think is really powerful, really interesting. And again, I think like you were saying, there's a lot of topics and issues with this that are very relevant to today. This still kind of the topics discussed. There's a moment where they talk about basically critical race theory in the classroom. They're talking about teaching the students and the rest of the community the real history of what happened here and the Alamo and everything that went on. And it's not, but there's this again, this thing about digging up the past, and do we really want to know the truth and what happened and the dirt and the grime, or should we just remember the nice stuff that we want to remember, the heroic characters that we believed in or think was the truth? So yeah, there's a lot to unpack, and I've probably not done the best job there, but yeah, there's a lot to talk about.
No, I think what's really interesting about what you've done there is that you started with the plot, and that it feels like a film that's going to draw you in through the plot, but then it does slowly become something else. And I think that's been perfectly presented by you there. I think that scene you spoke about, the school scene, where you have the white teachers and white members of the community essentially calling out this Mexican teacher for not teaching white history, essentially, is what they're doing. And it feels like that's kind of the thesis for why John Sayles made this movie, is that scene kind of then he's hanging something off that. This is a issue movie. He wants to have something to say, and what he says very successfully. But it's not it's not a noir. It's not a detective. The things you've mentioned, you're right. LA Confidential, before recording, and Chinatown as well. At times, it almost has that kind of forensic, investigative feel of like a Zodiac or something.
Yeah, I was going to say like Seven as well. I was like, because I thought going into it was going to be something like that there was going to be a lot of twists and turns, that there was going to be suspects, because there's not even really suspects. It's just like, I'm pretty sure my dad did it, but there's people aren't telling me the whole truth. The mayor, who is currently the mayor, was the deputy to his dad, to the Matthew McConaughey character. And he's like, don't dig this up, I know stuff. And like, he heavily implies that he knows what happened. So we kind of know we're going to get back to the mayor at some point. And he sees him again, he doesn't tell him anything, and then he sees him again for the final time, and we learn a bit more about what happened. But even then, I kind of guessed it. I kind of guessed it way ahead of time. I was like, it looked like it's him up until a certain point.
There's two big twists in this, and let's just say, like, we're going to spoil this film, and actually in spoiling this film, it might be that you end up spoiling other films which I think are worth talking in discussion around this movie as well. But I think there's two big twists. Who did the deed? Pun intended. and
who who did the deed as well?
yes, yeah, fair, good point. Yeah. There's two deeds that have been done. One is murder, and one is procreation. And both of those, I think, are pretty obvious.
Yeah,
I don't think there's any big surprise. I can't work out whether that's a failing of the movie or whether you're meant to, whether that's purposeful. What do you think?
And I guess maybe maybe the initial intrigue is to entice you in. Maybe they're going murder mystery. Everyone's interested. We like, people like, even like middle-aged mums like their, murder porn or whatever you want to describe it as, true crime, podcasts and shit. Like everybody can kind of get on board. Kids find that interesting. Adults find it interesting. So maybe that's the initial thing. You go in for this movie. It's almost like a kind of a bait and switch, maybe, that he's going, come and see this murder mystery movie. It's kind of a Western, kind of a noir. Come and check it out. And then you get there and you go, okay, right. Well, what's going to happen? And then it's kind of almost just laid out for you almost immediately. You kind of know ish to a degree. I will say the final, reveal, not really a twist, but I didn't see that entirely coming all the way.
Okay.
Because I think they imply quite heavily that, there's some bad blood between her mother and Matthew McConaughey's character, and you can see that she's kind of right wing. She doesn't like.
We have to talk about the mother character. She's really interesting.
She's really fascinating. I kind of, in some ways, I wish we got a bit more of her, because I was like, or kind of a bit more after as well, like what we were going to see, because she's not really keen on like people speaking Spanish, and she doesn't like to be referred to or her daughter as a Mexican.
She uses the term wetback herself about other
she does.
Mexicans, particularly about illegal immigrants. She's using it almost specifically about that, but I mean that's a very derogatory term.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's, I think there's that implied that Matthew McConaughey's character is racist as well. That he even though he's this heroic character, that he had to do certain deals, and he got the deputy in the mayor's office, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of kind of, I wouldn't say mystery, but there's kind of a just a vagary of what.
Oh yeah. But vagary's a great word,
yes. Yeah, and what he is, what he did, and what he's done for the town, and people always speak very highly of him. And again, of Chris Cooper's mother, like, oh, she was a saint, she was a saint, she was a saint, all this sort of stuff. And he's like, yeah, this is what I've heard my entire life. And I thought Chris Cooper was really good in this as well. I've not seen him in a lot, but I thought he was really, really strong, and you can see his kind of frustration. But what I like about it as well is that he's not a detective, like like he's not, because he accepted this job based off his dad.
Yeah,
like
he's been gone until 2 years previous, hasn't he? And his dad died,
went off.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah,
he says I'm basically a jailer. He's like, it's not the job I thought it was going to be. I'm essentially a jailer, is what I do here.
And they're trying to get him out. You've got I can't remember the guy's name who's going to take over. He's in the next election of the show. Yeah, his deputy. He's a great actor.
No, Otis is the guy who owns the bar, isn't it? It's
yes, yeah. I can't remember. He's in a ton of stuff. I think he might be in like some El Mariachi films. Kind of.
I think it's a character called Ray. I think.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. He's Mexican. He's a Mexican actor. I just can't remember his name off the top of my head. Tony Plana. Okay. Yeah. So there's all that kind of, is he or isn't he, and the relationship. And again, the mum doesn't want Elizabeth Pena is not allowed to see
Pilar.
Pilar is not allowed to see Chris Cooper's character as children or as adults. They're like that's not going to happen. It's never going to happen. Just let it go. And that's one of the resentments that Chris Cooper's character holds because of that. Because he fell in love with her and they were going to be together. It never quite happened for whatever reason. But yeah, the mum was really interesting. And again, there's a lot more there, and you kind of understand it a bit more as kind of things come out and the details unfurl. But yeah, there's a lot to kind of talk about. But yeah, she's fascinating. I thought she was a very, very layered, three-dimensional character out of all of them.
I think for me, as soon as they gave that hint that perhaps buddy had a different woman, I was just like, oh, okay, I see where this is going.
Yeah.
Because of the influences, because of it, like Chinatown, that was really in my head watching this, and it's not anywhere near the level of that. I wouldn't have said in terms of the mystery and the detective and the unveiling, and obviously it's not great to champion its director, but
no, sure.
You know,
but it is
great
art.
art. It's great art,
Yeah,
and it is great
exactly.
art. Chinatown.
Yeah.
So I kind of was like, okay, I see where this is going. We definitely will still talk about where it goes. Potentially, we'll do that.
Yeah.
But you used the word vagrant. I think that's a really interesting one because, mystery maybe isn't right, but vagary is. Maybe it should be a new subgenre. But I think that is true of the film all the way through. I think it's doing this on purpose. I think that is very deliberate. That's very purposeful, because I think at times I wasn't quite sure who people were, and I think it wanted us to be working hard to work that out. Like when you have the incident at Otis's bar and there's a shooting and somebody gets shot. It's the black bar in town, and he's the mayor of, can't remember what they call it. They say he's the mayor.
It's a pretty offensive name, but I will say it. They say he's the mayor of Darktown.
That's right, Darktown. But he sort of owns it, doesn't he? So
yeah, he does.
And it's the one safe place for people to go. And there's a shooting there. And it turns out this is involving a couple of the soldiers who are in the kind of Joe Morton subplot. But you don't know that to begin with. And it takes quite a long time to find out.
I was going to say,
a lot of this is quite hard to piece together. And I can see that perhaps it might lose some people along the way. I can see some people thinking like, oh, this is too much work. I can't be bothered with this.
Again, like I was going to mention this because I was like, by the time we're with the mayor and he's talking and he's just like, oh, well, this happened and let me talk to you about this and this is the history, and it felt like it wasn't like exposition. It just felt like I feel like I should know more than I already do.
Yeah,
it's kind of like going, well, you're in the town now. You've seen, because they do a few little bits and scenes and set things up. They show the school. They show some Mexican kids like robbing radios and stuff, and then you kind of get a sense of it. I think you get one of the first flashbacks as well. You find the body, but again, the body of that is just, again, it's like a second thought. They're not like, oh, we've got to solve this murder. They're just like,
the first flashback.
We'll get to it.
About 9 minutes in because I clocked when McConaughey first appeared. I think all that is deliberate, though. It's a bit like
I agree.
The Wire, like when The Wire. If you've watched that show, but for the first couple of episodes, you're like, "What the fuck's going on? I can't keep up with this." They're all using this street slang, and then the police are using police slang, and it's all Baltimore language, and you're like, but then by kind of episode 3 or 4, and you've got the rhythm. Suddenly you're in the world, and you're, and I think this is a bit similar to that. It wants you to catch up. It wants you to get into the rhythm of the piece and of the area and of. And
I think that's why I had to focus on it, because I was I was already kind of lost a little bit. But then I think that's the first scene that really starts setting shit up. Is when the mayor is going, right, well, I've been mayor and I used to be the deputy. I used to work with your dad, and and then again. And then we segue into that first flashback. And we see McConaughey and what he's doing. But again, very little information really, apart from him being like, I'm not going to take a bribe. I'm not going to do what you say. I'm standing up, you're corrupt and that's it. Get out of here. And again, they're like, oh yeah. And like even Chris Cooper's like, what's your version of those events? Because I've not heard your version of those. I've heard everybody else's version, not your version. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And again, I don't think anything in this film is not deliberate. I think again, it's, you go into certain films, like my friend Dan Keatis says a lot. He goes, you can color, you have expectations when you go into a film. You can, you can say, I'm expecting this thing to happen, or this character to appear, or this will do. You can do it with the Marvel movies or whatever, Star Wars. You can go in and go, I think this is going to be this type of thing. I talk about Hitchcock films as well, like how his films start off in a totally different position to where they famously end up. They're very, very different from what they begin as and what they become. And I think that's what this is for me. I kind of had to almost kind of forget what I thought it was going to be. And again, there was part of me throughout the film where I was like, I really wish it was more of what I thought. But then I still kind of embraced what it was, what it was saying, what it is, which is more kind of this kind of cultural drama. and less of a kind of, right is right, wrong is wrong, law, this guy's going to go to jail, he did a bad thing. It's not really about that. It's about history and how we operate, and decisions we've made, and it's very much kind of a cultural touchstone and history and political kind of, again, it's a discussion, but they use a narrative and several characters. And you were talking about the army base and everything, and Joe Morton's character, who, again, I listened to the audiobook of The Invisible Man for Tonya's Banned Books, and he did it, and he was amazing. He was already amazing anyway, but that particular book, he was very good at doing the audiobook and narrating and all the different characters. But yeah, I will say I feel like his story, I think it did need to be there. I think you need, because you're talking about racism and all this kind of cultural, all these cultural tensions. I think you do need, you can't just, it'd be stereotypical for it to just be, Mexicans and white people. I think it's a huge, hot pot of different cultures and mixing. And it was interesting to see that the army was they were kind of on their way out, and they were kind of just like, we're just here to do a job, and then we're going to go, and this is my position. And it's his hometown, it's Joe Morton's hometown, and he meets his dad again, who runs the bar, as you mentioned, and he kind of runs a lot more of that kind of, he does favors. He's not just a bar owner, he's a kind of cultural and political leader. He has is it the Seminole in the back for all the kind of Wild West kind of black history, with all that kind of, it's kind of a museum kind of type thing, which I thought was really interesting as well. But yeah, I love Joe Morton, but I felt this part of the story was the one thing that was slightly lacking for me. I felt it was a parallel for this father and this son can get on and can work things out. And there are issues, but they can settle this. Where Chris Cooper and his dad can't, because he's dead. The dad is dead. McConaughey's character is dead, not murdered, just died of natural causes. But they can't put those things to bed anymore. And again, there's a lot of stuff that Chris Cooper doesn't know. But I did feel like there maybe needed to be a bit more with the Joe Morton stuff. Like there needs to be more tension, or there needs to be something else going on. Because there's not really. They just go, "Oh, we never got on." And it's like, okay,
yeah. No, I agree with you. I think this happens in books, and this happens in long form storytelling, doesn't it? At times, you move away from the main focus of the story, and you're like, "Oh, I kind of want to get back to that. That's much more interesting." But I think it is very deliberate in terms of. You're right in terms of adding an extra element to the race relations, because in that conversation in the schoolroom, they talk about the fact that for the first time, the town has moved away from being mostly white.
Yes.
It's now whites are now the minority in this town in terms of the population numbers. So I think it's about reflecting the people that are there. And you're absolutely right on what you say about the parallels. And that's where some of the other clues starts to come in, because his dad left his mum and he's had an affair, and so there's all these kind of little breadcrumbs where the parallels are meant to be drawing you back to the deed story and trying to draw lines from the alternate stories, if you like, to help you join the dots within the deed story too. So, and again, I think a lot of this isn't apparent when you're watching it. You and I spoke about just before we start recording about when we watched it and processes, and normally I like to watch it a couple of days before at least recording. I have kind of sweet spot maybe of like 4 hours before, still fresh in my head, but I've had time to kind of ruminate on it. And I think I only watched it 24 hours ago, so a bit less for me than I normally do, and I can feel that even over that time, and I can feel after recording and talking to you probably about this and the details and a bit more time, it's going to keep growing in my estimation. So I think some of this comes to you later. But again, maybe, as you said, that's really deliberate from Sayles too, because the whole film is about drawing past and present together. And the more you think about it, the more things become apparent and more important they are, or the more you dwell on them, the more you can learn and you can work out for yourselves what's right and wrong, because there is no black and white here. This film is literally all grey.
Very much so. Very, very much so. And again, I grew up kind of reading comic books, so again, there's these kind of moral absolutes, which is not true, is it? There's nuance in everything, but I think even now I prefer that kind of storytelling because it's kind of, again, that's my sweet spot, because it's kind of simple, it's straightforward. The bad guys are bad, the good guys are good, and there's you can tell the difference. And I think that's the moral ambiguity and the grayness is the real world. And your actions, even the smaller actions, could be deemed bad or good or what have you. So yeah, and I think that's part of me coming in going, where's my murder mystery? Where is it? I want more noir. I want more, and again, it's like when we talk about, like we talked about, like noir protagonists, where they're horny for like married women and these femme fatales, and they've got a drinking problem, and they're behind on their bills, or very kind of really broken kind of characters. But with this, he's very functional. Like, he doesn't really drink. He's doing his job. He's not causing any issues. He's just living in the shadow of his dad. There's a line he gives where he's like, right at the end, no spoilers just yet for the end, but there's the thing when he goes, you were the only thing in my life that my dad didn't, I didn't get from my dad, or inherit from my dad, or he didn't have a part in. You're the one thing, and that's why I got divorced and I came back and I took this job, even though I'm not a detective, I'm not a sheriff, I'm kind of coasting on my dad's coattails, which he hates doing. But he feels like if he's going to come back and he needs to have a job, and it needs to be something that keeps him in town, then sheriff is the best one for it. And again, like you said, he's a jailer. He doesn't really do detective work particularly. Like all the detective work is actually done by the army guys that are like, oh, this is a 45 round.
Yeah. Or he farms it out to the I can't remember what he calls them. It's like the marshals, or like the there's like another unit that was like all the forensics he's sent to them. And
he's bothered, but he kind of knows what the result will be, but he's kind of like lackadaisical about it. He's just like, they'll figure it out. And then the army guys find the body, they find the star, they find a round later, which is not in the rifle rounds, which is where the body is found on the firing range near the army base. And they go, oh, this is actually it's such like a innocuous scene. They just go, we should probably give that to the sheriff, shouldn't we? Yeah, I think we should. And then that just carries on, and there's a bit more information they can dig. And I absolutely adored it. Like this film does not have a lot of levity, a lot of laughs, a lot of fun, because it's just not that film, which is fine. There's some moments here and there, but Frances McDormand, when she comes into it, I was like, oh, this is a breath of fresh air. I needed this just to kind of liven it up a little bit, however you feel about it. She plays Chris Cooper's ex-wife, who's quite, she's on a lot of pills and mentally ill, and he acknowledges, they have a kind of a little argument, but he acknowledges that he wasn't great in the marriage, and she acknowledges she wasn't great in the marriage, and then she's like, shit's in the garage, go and get it. But yeah, it was a nice little cameo from her, and I think she's great as an actor anyway. But yeah, I think I did need a little bit of like, just again, just a breather from all the kind of like, whew, this is like heavy stuff going on.
I agree, and that's going to lead us on nicely into the next section. But just before we do that, like we said, like it's not a mystery, it's a vagary, and it's not a noir. It's like a nice guy noir. It's like it's creating its own total subgenre. It's like a nice guy noir vagary instead of a noir mystery. But yeah. I think Sam's a really interesting character because, I agree. He says, I'm sort of living in my dad's shadow, but his previous job was working for his wife's dad. So he's kind of letting himself fall into this constant trap. I guess perhaps he was looking for a different father figure in her father too, but his previous job that he got fired from, understandably, I guess, when he got divorced from his wife, was basically working as an underling for her dad as well. So he kind of spent his whole life in dad's shadows, which I think is a really interesting commentary.
Yeah, and I think that's his plan, is to come home and find his own identity again, and again dig up his own past and try and figure out who he is. But unfortunately, because of the legend of Buddy Deeds, he can't really escape it. And as much as he wants to kind of claw his own path and find his own way and his own corner of the world, he can't really do it. like as much
No.
as he wants to, as much as he tries. And then the only thing that's kind of keeping him going right now is trying to find out if his dad was a bad guy, which he wants his dad to be a bad guy as well. He wants his dad to be a killer, to be a murderer, like which is again very interesting for him to, because he's only digging at this because he's like, I want to know who my dad really was and what the real truth of him was, because I know a truth and other people know this truth. But also there's something else here that nobody knows, seemingly. And what happened to Charlie Wade. Again, there's a lot to kind of unpack, so many layers and characters and again, stuff being talked about. But yeah, I think it's this huge canvas that John Sayles painting against. And again, the storylines kind of intersect and things, and this again, like the Joe Morton one, I think needed a bit of work for me, and again, like the firing of the female soldier who was in the club with the guy who got shot, who was another soldier, and Joe Morton is the general or colonel, I can't remember.
Colonel, yeah. No, his wife keeps calling him general, but he keeps reminding he's colonel. Yeah,
he goes, colonel. And he, and then she's in there, and I was kind of like, what is she saying here? She's like, oh, I'm in the army because they tell us what to do, and kind of, yeah. And again, I kind of see what he's saying, but or trying to say in that scene with like, we're black people, and we're the only thing we can do is be told what to do by white people, basically. And that's,
she says like, I'm going to get
so many words
anyway, so I might as well just do it and get paid to do it.
Exactly. Yeah. So she's basically saying, if I didn't do this, and they talk about her coming from a really tough area and making something of herself, and Joe Morton's clearly done that. But then and that reminds me of his dad and maybe what he used to say and what he talked about. But then even in that scenario where there is that tension, the dad Otis still has all the paper clippings about his son. He's so proud of him, even though there is that tension and they don't really get on. And again, like Joe Morton's character was like, the dad's like, I bet you didn't think you'd end up back here, and he's like, well, you get given a position by the army, you take it. You don't say no, and that's it. And they don't initially kind of see eye to eye, but again, as time goes on within the film, then they do, and they kind of the relationship softens to a bit more of an amicable one than again Buddy or Sam Deeds does.
Yeah, it's interesting because this idea, sort of putting that aside a little bit, but again, going back to something you said before, this idea of like a canvas and this wide cast of characters and having these brief moments of levity. I agree. Like Francis McDormand is one of those, and the two kind of army guys are them as well, aren't they?
Yeah,
they're kind of a bit bumbleish, and when they're out for the run with Joe Morton's character is really funny. They're like out doing an army run, and again, I didn't realize they were in the army until that point. And he's like, well, I like to sprint this last bit home, and he runs off like Forrest Gump, and they're like lumbering behind him. So there are these little kind of brief moments of levity, but it's more with the kind of outlandish characters, and that's where it made me think of perhaps being quite an influential film on the Coens, perhaps. And obviously Francis McDormand goes into their kind of world, but also Paul Thomas Anderson. I think he's got to be a fan of this movie. Yeah, it has that lived-in sense of real people, and you use this word again, like intersecting lives all the way through. I was thinking like, wow, I bet the Coens must owe this guy some debt of gratitude. And then at times I was thinking like, oh yeah, P.T. Anderson definitely, without the kind of more comic booky style, Tarantino to an extent as well. I think probably I think it's influenced a lot of mid to late 90s auteurs.
I think even into the 2000s, I think the things like Hell or High Water or Wind River and the Tommy Lee Jones movies that he made as well, the kind of neo or revisionist westerny stuff. I think there's a little bit of that in there. Not the same. But I think there's a little bit of that influence as well, that it's about the community and what's happening in the community, and this one thing that's kind of highlighting all the problems that are already there, they're already existing. I agree.
I see that. No Country is kind of the version of this. No Country for Old Men of this movie, which you kind of think it's going to be before you watch it. I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Um,
I thought that. I thought we're going to have like a Shigur type character, or again, some be a bit more about like bank robberies, or the standard kind of tropey stuff you get in a western or a noir or something, or a lot of backstabbings and double dealings and things like that. But yeah, it's not quite that. I mean, I've just recorded. I've not released it yet, but the Diana Spencer 2021, and like what I believed that film was going to be and how it was advertised is nothing like that film is. Again, I won't spoil that podcast, but I mean, it's probably out already now, I guess. But yeah, like that's the way it was marketed, or the way it was kind of the way we expect a biopic to be is not what that film is at all. And I think it's kind of, I had a similar feeling with this, but I think I had more of an idea going into Diana that it might be a bit more like that, and Spencer, sorry, than this. I thought this was, again, like trying to fight my own head and get that idea out, because it, again, is not the film he was making. It's not the film he wanted to make. It's not the film it is. And I'm kind of glad for it as well. I'm glad I kind of, they did do the bait and switch, and I enjoyed it. In spite of me going, this isn't what I wanted. I still really enjoyed and like took it all in and appreciated it for what it was.
I appreciate you. In that moment, you were avoiding spoilers for an audience of one, which is me. So I appreciate that, because, as you said, by the time this is out, that would
can't lose my biggest fan. Can't lose my biggest fan.
But yes, I appreciate you, mate. Thank you.
My
We've
pleasure.
touched upon it a couple of times, but I think we've got to talk about the time shifting moments in the movie, because they're widely celebrated, and I think rightly so. I think they're brilliant. So John Sayles describes them as a flow of time like a river, which I think is a lovely phrase. And as you said, it kind of, and the first one is, you're right, it's in the bar, and it's in Otis's bar, sorry, and it's Sam talking to the mayor, the former deputy, and the mayor is played by the guy who's the cowboy sheriff from Roger Moore's James Bond movies.
Yes,
as well,
yeah, I
very
didn't
different
realize
performance
that.
here, really understated.
Yeah, it's like James Bond. Yeah, it's very different. I didn't even recognize him initially, and
No.
I was like, I know him from somewhere, but I can't put my finger on it. And I was like, it's definitely an over the top performance, whatever it is, because I remember him being particularly over the top. But yeah, when I went to look on IMDb, I went, there he is. That's the picture they have of him, and I was like, perfect. Yeah, the best person they could have cast in that role, I think.
And what Sayles chooses to do is he kind of pans the camera, doesn't it? It's generally a pan, one way or the other, left or right. And then there's obviously some quick scene transitions going on, actors moving into different places. And I read a funny bit behind the scenes, which you might have read too, where this actor couldn't get out of shot in enough time. So they literally had some extras that picked him up in his chair and moved him out of the way and brought in a new chair so McConaughey could sit in the same spot. But essentially, these like live transition happen. So it's a fluid camera move, and then this one stops on kind of like a plate of tortillas, doesn't it? And then it's lifted up, and there's some bribe money underneath. But this happens maybe half a dozen times throughout the movie, and each time it happens seems to be at like quite a pivotal moment, either for a character and tying their history, their past and present together, or for something kind of thematically important to do with kind of race or border crossings. Or this first one I think is particularly to do with that idea of like the telling of myths, because this is kind of the moment that the town talks about when Buddy stood up to Wade and changed the town for the better forever. So yeah, I think sometimes one shots and certain techniques like focus pull like in Jaws or split diopter that Brian De Palma does all the time, I love all these things, but sometimes other filmmakers throw them in to show all of what I can do. But here it feels very purposeful. It feels very like, I can't think of the right word, like kind of, it's very like tangible wasn't right, but like it matters for the moment. It's not a thing for him to show off.
Yeah it's the right choice, the right device to use, I think. I think what you were saying, like it was like a river, is like and the time and the importance of this moment is kind of flowing both ways, kind of into the past and into the present, and what it says about where they are now and how different it is, but how similar at the same time, and how similar his dad is to him, but also how different at the same time as well. I think for that kind of transition, again, it's again to show exactly that nothing has really changed, that it is just as vital, and this information, this murder, this all this stuff that's going on is just as important as it was 30 years ago as it is now. Things have changed, but things haven't changed, and that's why it's a seamless transition, into, because it is like yesterday. Like, all these people remember it as if it was yesterday, and that's why we're showing it, I think, as it being just like, again, not when I jokingly said like the doodle doo, all the kind of flashback kind of, we get all the different effects for a flashback you could think of. This one feels right for the story. It feels right for the characters. It feels right for the themes and everything that they're describing in the film. That device, that idea of doing that, works on every level, and I think it's the best choice they could have made given the story they're telling.
I particularly love the Sam and Pilar one at the river.
Yes.
So in present day, he's sort of taken her there. He's trying to woo her again, isn't he? He says he came back to town because of her. Like, she's the reason that's drawn him back. I guess he's heard that her husband has passed away. And
I'll be there right away.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I'm on the bus now.
The camera sort of pans away from them to the river, and then we see them as tweens, pre-teenagers, maybe. I'm not sure how they're supposed to be.
Yeah, I think they're like 13 and 14, I think, round about.
Yeah, having like an important discussion about how, if they can be together, and how they're going to tell their parents because they don't approve. And then the camera pans up again, and it's back to Sam in present day, and Pilar's gone, and it's him kind of lamenting on the lost years and how to move forward from here. And I thought that was a really beautiful moment.
Yeah, I really, really like that one. I think some of them are weaker than the ones we've mentioned. I think the one in the bar is good because it's again the same bar, and again, that money, showing that money was quite clever, I think, as well. And that one is quite good as well. I think there's one where he's speaking to the female owner, former owner of the black bar, and it's kind of just it does the thing, but it's not really, it doesn't really go. Or do much for me, that particular one. At that point, it kind of felt like a little bit like, okay, they're doing the thing again. They're doing the flashback, but at least it's consistent. I'll give it that. It's not, throwing it out. But yeah, it didn't really do anything interesting. It just did the slow pan to the left, and we were in the club, I think, if I remember rightly. So yeah, I think there was a better way of transitioning that into something else.
Yeah,
but
I did love the early part of that scene, though. Is that with the granny sitting on the porch
with the Game Boy? Yeah,
and she basically says, like, she basically predicts the addiction to gaming that is going to happen over the next. She's like, oh, you think you're going to play one level, but then you just can't put this thing down. It's like it's amazing. It's like she's got a crystal ball looking into the future.
John Sayles ahead of his time on so many things, so many levels. But yeah, it's. Yeah, I thought it was good. That was quite. Again, that's a good bit of humor. Again, it's not much of it, but when you do get it, I'm like, yeah, this is charming. These people are charming. This community is charming. As it's dark elements and it's troubling elements, and and there's a lot of people really kind of outraged all the time, talking about stuff, and literally like walking down the street and shouting in the mayor's face and the politician's face about how bad things are or how things should be different. And Chris Cooper's character, I love some of those moments because he doesn't really disagree. He's like, you're right, or kind of acknowledges without saying he agrees, but appreciates their opinion and what they're saying. But also, can we just crack on with our lives, please? Can you just not be yelling at people in the street?
Yeah, he's also more than willing. I thought this was a really interesting scene to step aside. So when the deputy's talking about the fact, I've been asked to run for the next sheriff, he's like, yeah, you'd make a great sheriff, and the guy who's asking him is of Mexican descent. So it's really interesting that he's kind of happy to change with the times. He can see that that's the progressive way that the town needs to go. So you can tell that he's just going to step aside and let this guy take it on. I thought that was a really interesting moment too.
But also, he doesn't care. He's not there to be sheriff. He's there to meet Pilar and spend time with her. And I think at this point he kind of has, and they've kind of re-engaged kind of emotionally and physically and everything. But yeah, he was never there. It was never there to like, he was like, I'm going to make my dad proud, or I'm going to be the best sheriff since my dad, or anything like that. But like when he says, oh yeah, you're probably, there's a guy who's going to run for sheriff. And he goes, all right then, cool. Because the thing he's interested is getting the information out of the town people and the evidence and the body and all that stuff. He wants his obsession now. It's not really an obsession for him, but it's his driving kind of motivation is figuring out what happened that night, and then how is he going to resolve it, if he is going to resolve it, and how will that affect him and his relationship with Pilar and the rest of the town folk as well. So yeah, I kind of was like, I think I'd be the same. I'd be like, yeah, sure, whatever. Yeah, it's a job. You know, I'm sure you're great. You're good. You're a nice guy. Yeah, go for it. Whatever. You know, I just kind of like step aside because again, his focus, his interest isn't there. So it's like, yeah. And I'm sure that, you know, that guy's fine and will be a lovely sheriff. I'm sure he was. But yeah, I can see why he did that. Like, given the way the film was going, because towards the end he stops wearing because he at the beginning he walks around in the outfit, in the uniform, the sheriff uniform, wears the star, and then in that car you see him take off the badge.
That's when he's going to Mexico, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
So
but
he goes to speak to some guys on.
Yeah, because there was a guy who part of the investigation is Charlie Wade killed a guy who was illegally transporting immigrants across the border.
Well, Ilario Cruz, as it turns out.
Yeah, Ilario Cruz, and you do see the scene where he shoots him, kills him, and he's implied to be Pilar's dad. Or I think they do say he is Pilar's dad.
Pilar's dad, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Let's pause. Real quick pause. In case anybody hasn't watched the film, is going to watch it and is listening, this is your spoiler warning, because now we're about to not rip apart. We're not in a bad way, but we're about to
tear a hole open into the spoilers. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Go on, keep going. Sorry.
So and Chris Christopherson is very good in this. He's pretty good in most things. He's very menacing and very
mean old son of a bitch.
Yeah, he's intimidating, and yeah, you can see why, you know, he is who he is, and they cast him very well. He goes down, but at this point, he is taking the star off. But I think you see it that he's gradually doesn't care about being sheriff anymore. He kind of, because he then starts walking around just with like a red shirt on, like pretty much just in his civvies, because he's like, right, well, he's going to be sheriff anyway, so there's no point me walking around, and he knows kind of whatever he finds, he might not, you know, act on it, you know, might not necessarily arrest them, or because it's 30 years ago. I don't know what do they say, the statute of limitations. Yeah, so I don't know if that's still. I think with murder, actually, I think it does last. I think it's sort of smaller crimes that it doesn't. But yeah. So do you want to go full on into the ending?
Yeah. Well, so what Wade does is his tactic is to lure his victims, I suppose is the only word for it, into incriminating themselves. So he'll with Ilario Cruz, he says like, "Oh, have you got a gun in the car? Let's get it out. Just make sure it's all legal." And then as he's reaching for the gun, he shoots him in the back. So this is his kind of tactic. He keeps going back to it, and he keeps using it as his reason for killing anyone really that he doesn't feel is cutting him into that. So he wants to kill Ilario Cruz because he's not cutting him into his illegal immigration scheme. So it's when everybody's not kind of paying him off, he'll just take them out to prove a point. So one of the people that he's about to do that to is Otis when he was younger, and that's one of the other key flashback scenes, isn't it?
Yeah, so Otis is running his own kind of gambling after hours at the bar. He doesn't own. He does own in the present, but in the past, 30 years ago, he does not own. He's just a young guy working there.
He's already had a run-in with Wade as well.
Yeah, because Wade knows already that he's doing what he's doing. He just hasn't caught him doing it yet, and he's implying like, "Don't be doing this." And he's like, "Pour my drink, do this." And again, very racist, very intimidating, horrible. Shit going on, and the way he talks to him and treats him and stuff, and again pulls a gun on him for no reason, and he goes back to the bar, finds him, and then he kind of asks Otis to give him the money for a cut of this. He goes to get a cut of this, And this is the same night that Matthew McConaughey, Buddy Deeds, has kicked him out of the cafe, I think, or the other bar, the white bar, let's say, and they leave, and he follows them and kicks the door open.
Deputy Hollis, who's, as you said, now Mayor Hollis,
is now mayor. Yeah. So we've got the deputy, you've got Wade, you've got Otis. Otis is reaching for some more money because he's like, "You've not given me enough money," or I think he says, "You've got a gun," or there's something that he makes him reach for it again, because that's how he gets away with it. He goes, "Oh well, he reached for a gun. I've got to kill him. He's going to kill me. I've got to kill him." So he does reach for the gun, or he's going for the gun, and Hollis sees this. And then again, Buddy comes in, kicks the door in, and you think, because the way that the story's been told and it's been set up, you think again that Buddy's gonna be the killer, but he's not. Hollis shoots Wade dead, and they're all kind of there at that moment, and then they make an agreement together and they hide the body. And they never talk about it again.
So Hollis does it because he was a witness to the killing of Ilario Cruz earlier.
Yeah,
and
also the treatment of Otis. And he sees the pattern, doesn't he? He sees he's intimidating, he's being nice, he's being friendly. He's like, oh yeah, well, he should.
And Hollis is scared of him. He goes along with it, doesn't he, to begin with? So when you see the Buddy Wade kind of confrontation, Hollis is just kind of standing meekly beside Wade, but you can kind of tell he's not in it because he agrees. He's in it because he's scared. Yeah. So then when you see the murder of Ilario and how brutal that was, and you can see where this is going. You can see that Hollis is getting near the end of his
pattern.
Rope, really.
There's a pattern to his behavior, and it's happening. And again, they talk about how saintly Buddy Deeds was, but they also talk about like how awful Charlie Wade was. And even Otis says, your dad was a lot of things, but he wasn't Charlie Wade. He wasn't anywhere near as bad as Charlie Wade. He may have done some dodgy things, may have done this, may have, maybe bribed somebody, done this here and there, but, black people weren't being killed. Mexicans weren't being killed. They weren't being murdered by your dad.
Yeah, they used the word murdered, actually.
Yeah. And there's like, he was murdering them. And that's again that kind of dichotomy there, but Cooper's character Sam wants to believe that he isn't, because he's had such a bad time with growing up with his dad. He wants to believe he is the villain of the piece, where actually he's not. And again, I kind of saw that coming. I kind of was like, he's not going to do it. He's going to be. It's too easy that's what the character wants, and it's going to be too easy for it to be him. There's going to be something else to it. And then those two characters kind of come together, and they're found in the present at the bar discussing, and that's when we see the flashback. And again, does the kind of wonderful little pan over, and then we're there back in the bar in the past. And that's kind of where they find it. And then well, as
part of their cover up, they take £10,000, don't they, from the kind of the county money,
dollars.
Dollars. Thank you. And they claim that's the money that Wade stole in order to disappear. But that's when my brain started going, hang on, now I remember that somehow. Let me look her name. What's her name? The name of the mum. Somehow.
I can't remember her name.
Mercedes?
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah.
Somehow Mercedes had enough money to open up a restaurant.
Oh, yeah. And again, that he's, Hollis's mayor. Otis buys the bar.
Yeah. So essentially, Buddy, they agree to bury the body. That body's now been found. But as it turns out, this £10,000 went towards setting up Mercedes in a restaurant. But why on earth would Buddy do that? Because it turns out that she is his bit on the side.
Yes. Yeah. Again, the letters he picks up from his ex-wife, Chris Cooper, Sam, he finds a little, I think it's an unsent letter, I believe. It was never mailed or something. And it kind of reveals.
There's a photo of them together, isn't there?
Yeah. Matthew McConaughey looking as hot as he ever did, with a young Mercedes. And we do see a young Mercedes meet Ilario Cruz. That's when it's like, when did your dad do this and do that? Who was your dad? What have you? And we find out they're actually, and gets a little bit old boy at the end. It gets a little bit Chinatowny.
Well,
because
Chinatown again, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
because there's earlier in the film when they've, like I said, they've reconnected physically. There is a sex scene, them having sex together. It's them kind
Pretty
of
steamy, to be fair.
It was a little bit, like, Elizabeth Pena is, she's a very beautiful lady, and I think she's very. I watched Blue Steel at the Forbidden Worlds Film Festival. I think one of my comments was like, I needed more Elizabeth Pena in it, really. That was like my one criticism, I think. And luckily in this, she's fantastic, and just a wonderful performance. All the things she's doing in this, she should get all of her laurels. But yeah, we learned that they're actually half brother and sister.
Yes. Which, again, I did kind of see that. As soon as I found out that Buddy had an affair, I was like, okay, I've got it. I know
there's only the one woman in this, so it must be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Got to have more than two women in this film.
What I perhaps didn't see is the end of the movie when they're sat again by the river on the car bonnet.
I know,
and Sam reveals to Pilar this truth. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure. Well, let me ask you this question.
Please do.
Do they decide to do what I think they decide to do at the end of the movie?
Yeah, there's two things that made me unintentionally laugh in this film. So one is this moment. The other moment is when they reveal a plaque to Buddy Deeds, and they're like, and someone goes,
"That's for the new courthouse."
Yeah, for the new courthouse, and the it's all set up, and they're like, Buddy Deeds, the hero, and Chris Cooper turns up. They didn't even tell him either that they were going to do it. He just kind of turns up and goes, "Yeah, my dad would love this." And somebody, it's like somebody from like far off in the crowd goes, "It looks just like him," and it's the worst image or plaque or representation of Matthew McConaughey you have ever seen. It was clearly made before Matthew McConaughey was cast because it looks fuck all like him. It just made me laugh out loud. I was like, "It looks just like him." No, it doesn't. It does not look anything like Matthew McConaughey. Anyway, yeah, this moment kind of made me laugh as well because, I think with films like this, when something's revealed like this, it's kind of horrific. And there's And there's people in like real life, that are very, very like distant cousins, and they don't realize until like the wedding day, and they both have the same grandmother or something, and you're like, oh shit, like how do we, we're in love now. What do we do? And again, it's usually like, oh, it's like Old Boy. Let's go back to Old Boy. I think he cuts his own tongue off here, right? Spoilers for Old Boy at the end when we
did say, we're getting spoilers for all other films because we do, right?
I know I do. I know I do for all my Tonya Todd spoiler warnings. So yeah, like that's a horrific thing. And again, like the sex scene in that film, the original film, is shown to be very like full on hardcore, like really like kind of like almost like pornography.
Denis Villeneuve's got a movie in this, Ouvre, as well. One of his early movies is in this realm. Spoiler of a really old Denis Villeneuve movie as well, where people find out they're brother and sister after being separated. Yeah.
So we in Old Boy,
they ain't happy about it.
No, they're not. The idea, most films would present this as a horrific thing or a weird thing or a disgusting thing or something quite disturbing, I think, and rightly so, but this goes a different route. And it says, and immediately, like they reveal it, they kind of go, oh, fuck. It's not like, oh my god, I can't believe it, our whole lives are turned upside down, what have we done, oh this is disgusting, how could we do this to each other, we're related. They go, oh right, by the way, I can't get pregnant.
So I can't get pregnant. That's her
first
thought.
That's her first thought. By the way, I can't get pregnant. Yeah, I was like that's your first thing you say. I can't have kids. Right. You don't want to talk about anything else about this. Like, oh, I can't have kids, so let's keep fucking. Let's keep fucking. I like us fucking. Let's keep fucking. So yeah, they basically agree they're in love, deeply in love, and they kind of agree to be together. Which I just found like, I still found it like bizarre that that's the choice they went with. Like if
it's quite a hard out as well. Like this is the end of the movie. It's like. She says, I can't have kids. Forget the Alamo, which is kind of the thesis of the whole movie, really, which is, don't take things at face value, don't believe the myths, don't buy into white revisionist history, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But also, it's meant to be like, okay, I guess before doing what you want or what you think. I don't know, and then it's out. It's literally that's it.
Yeah, it's like roll credits.
Credits roll with a quite jaunty tune.
Yeah. It's just.
I mean, think of the other films.
Bizarre.
Like I say, think of Old Boy, think of Chinatown.
Yeah, exactly.
Think of the movies that have had similar events happen to them, and how kind of like world shattering it is for those characters. And yeah, this definitely goes a different way.
Yeah, I kind of respect it in a way because it's gone right. Those are kind of the films I like, but what if we did this? It kind of reminds me a little bit of the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies. They go, well, we're going to have to do this scene again, but let's do it this way instead, or let's try and do it that way, or say a different line, or do this. And again, not really that different, but still sort of different.
Just racking my brain for when they revealed in Amazing Spider-Man that
they were all related.
Gwen Stacy and Peter Parker were related. I couldn't remember that scene.
That's why he was like. That's why he was like. Maybe I won't just catch her this time, just because we don't have weird kids, spider kids, and inbred kids. We don't want that. That's another mess. That's a very dark Spider-Man timeline I don't want to explore. That's across and away from the Spider-Verse, the dark Spider-Verse. But like this, I mean, in terms of like going, this is what was done before. We're gonna do something else. And like it's a choice. I'll give it that. I respect it. I respect brave, choices, and it is a very brave choice. But yeah, I don't know if maybe it would have been stronger if they just kind of revealed it and then didn't say anything, and then we cut, and then we then we can make up our own minds. Do they stay together? Do they not stay together? How do they manage this? The uncertainty of how this town is going to survive and how it's going to, because again, it's just still this very tense, this racial tension, cultural tension there. And again, how does she respond? And do they go back and look at their own lives, and recontextualize everything? Because that's it wasn't because because it implies that Matthew McConaughey's character is a racist, which you've seen really throughout the film that he's not, or that seemingly wouldn't be, because of the other interactions he's had with Otis and other characters as well. And like the Native American character or the indigenous person that we meet is, he speaks very highly of his dad as well. We can see that even within the town and within the everything. But yeah, it just seemed so... I don't know if it was just the delivery. It was the one bit I didn't kind of believe in the film. Because it just kind of like... It's kind of like, again, I can't find something to kind of, an accurate thing that I can compare it against. I've definitely heard people go like, oh, it's okay. Yeah. It's almost like, oh, by the way, I'm not a racist, even though I've just said something racist.
Right.
I don't know. Yeah. It's kind of, I don't know. I'm trying to find, I can't find the right kind of parallel, but it's just like, it's just kind of, feels so bizarre the way that she said it and delivered it. It was like, she clearly it's like the impetus kind of won, the kind of her whatever. It just kind of came out of her because she was like, I love him and I want to be with him. It's all right, we can still have sex. Like that's the first thing she's thinking of. I really thought she would say like, oh my God, that man was my dad. I never knew. I'd never had a relationship with him. There's a million other questions I would have. Again, I would feel disgust and weird and strange and odd and all those kind of things. But also, that would not be my first go-to. Like, let's keep shagging. Let's keep shagging, But, and then Chris Cooper's like, yeah, guess we will. I love you. Weird ending to the film. But, yeah, on the whole, I think it's a very strong film. But yeah, there are again, no film's perfect, is it? But I do think it's as films go, I think it is quite strong.
No, I agree with you. I think an earlier cut would have done it some favors. I think because that openness would tie in much better with with the rest of the thesis of the film, which is, how do cultures mix successfully? Well, unless he's just saying every culture should just start
inbreeding.
forgetting the inbreed stuff, like start shagging no matter the kind of
consequences.
or like social parameters, or like the way that people would look at you for doing it, or maybe that's
prejudice,
what he's trying to say. I don't know, but I think,
or even if you again leave that, but actually you end on Mercedes helping the border crossers, the Mexicans coming into Texas. Maybe end on that instead. Maybe because that was interesting as well, because that tells us something a little bit about her. Which
saw
again,
herself, didn't she, in the young girl? Yeah,
exactly. And she was like, and this kind of her prejudice, she dropped it. This self-hatred, this prejudice, whatever you want to call it. She goes, "No, I will help you. Here's some money," and then she allows them to speak in Spanish and responds to them in English. But she kind of understands, and again they say, "Oh, we're with Mercedes Cruz, we're with Madame Cruz," or something like. They know they're in safe hands, even though she's kind of been quite off-putting with this young man who's doing all the stuff he's doing. He knows they can trust her.
It was another mirror, though, wasn't it? It was another, like, Ilario and Mercedes was being mirrored in this young man who works at her restaurant, and his wife that he's brought over from, because he's married somebody from America for a green card, hasn't he?
Yeah, he got her a green card,
bringing his Mexican wife over. So
yeah, again, I think he said it was his. Actually, I think he said it was his cousin. I think. Or something like that.
I think fiance definitely said something, because she was like, okay. So I think, again, it's meant to be kind of mirroring this triangle of Mexican and white, and
it's a lot.
Yeah, so he wasn't in it much. What did you think of McConaughey?
Yeah, I was going to say he is really barely in this. Like, again, the film does talk about his character all the way through, but he's only really in maybe 3 scenes. The drive-in where they're showing Black Mama, White Mama.
And that's when he breaks up Pilar and Sam as teenagers, necking in the back of a car. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think Black Mama and White Mama is saying something as well, and like the kind of racial tensions in that film as well.
Yeah.
And we see the opening
flashback scenes, isn't it?
Yeah. So there's kind of the opening where he says, "I'm not going to be what you want me to be," and then the murder of Charlie Wade, and that is it. That is literally it. So less than Texas Chainsaw: The Next Generation.
Oh, much less. Yeah. But quite fitting for what his career is at this moment in time.
Yeah, fair enough.
As with his other movies,
absolutely. I thought he was fine, but he has maybe, I think, probably 7 lines of dialogue throughout the entire film. Maybe that. It's really hard for me to, we'll get into the decision of what we think and where it lands in the rankings. But it's kind of, again, I think the film is strong, but part of me does feel like you could have had anybody in that role to a degree.
It's interesting, because John Sayles has a lot to say about Matthew McConaughey, whether he feels like he's been pivotal in his kind of discovery, or like his path and his journey. And obviously this is the same year that A Time to Kill comes out. So my next movie I'm covering, and the next performance from it, is going to be massive and pivotal. But I think Sayles kind of wants some of that afterglow as well. Because I just wrote down a few of the quotes that I read of him saying, and saw him saying some interviews. He says things like, "Oh, this guy is going to be around. He's a nice combination of having comfort in front of the lens, but also intensity when you need it." He says things like, "This guy's just got this charisma. He has a relaxed masculinity, and that he's not going to be a short-lived phenomenon." So he sort of saw it in him.
Yeah.
And he says he cast him because he felt like he would be a good counterpoint to Chris Christopherson. He didn't want anybody famous. He wanted somebody that wasn't known, but he felt like when you saw them on screen, they could go toe-to-toe with this kind of Chris Christopherson-esque masculine, ultra-masculine, kind of regressive masculine man, I guess.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
McConaughey in that first scene, he's just always sitting down, isn't he? He never stands up. He never... one movement he does is he pulls his gun out and he puts it on the table. But it's all quite laconic. It's all quite laid back. It's all very Matthew McConaughey, to be perfectly honest. It's interesting. Yeah. I mean,
I mean, it's he's good in it. Like
Yeah.
I don't think it's a bad performance. I don't think it's just there's blink. It's very blink and you'll miss it. It really is. More so maybe than My Boyfriend's Back, maybe. But yeah, like it is kind of like he's there, has his lines, he's off, comes back a little bit, has a few more lines about midway through, and then at the end comes back, has a few lines. But to be fair, even in that cinema scene, it might not even be him. Like you don't really see.
Right.
His face.
Yeah.
It was like the end of Texas Chainsaw. Like he's just running down the road. I'm not even sure if it was him doing that. That was filmed him doing it. So yeah, I don't know. It's definitely his voice. So they're dubbing it over. But yeah, I don't know if it was definitely him in the rain at the cinema and the drive-in. But yeah, it's hard. Like again, it's fine. Again, like you said, it's very all very measured and controlled and powerful. And he does, and he's not like Chris Cooper either, which I think is good as well. He's not Charlie Wade. He's not Chris Cooper, but he is ultimately himself. And again, he is kind of the archetypal cool cowboy. The kind of the Clint Eastwood, the John Wayne-esque type, kind of the smooth gunslinger, the guy from Magnificent Seven, the one in the lace and the leather. No, the guy who's in everything. The guy who's in Superman 3. That one. That guy. Can't remember his name.
Of all the films to pick,
I'm picking. He's the main villain. He's the Lex Luthor in it, but he's not. I can't remember his name. He's in Battle Beyond the Stars as well. He plays pretty much the same role in that as he does in Magnificent Seven. I'm going to look it up.
Yeah, it's not helping me out. So.
But yeah, what did you think though to his performance?
No, I agree with you. I mean, I'm not even sure he's
Robert Vaughn.
Okay, yeah,
there you go.
I'm not sure he was even quite. Some of these things that Sayles was saying, relaxed masculinity and charisma. I mean, I agree. He has all of that. He looks good. He looks cool. He does look relaxed. He is Matthew McConaughey. I mean, I don't think he is that invested in his role in this movie either. I've got a very brief comment to read out from Greenlights. But the fact that it doesn't really factor in for him from this period makes sense because of A Time to Kill just about to come out. So I don't think maybe he's proud of the movie, but I don't think he's too invested in his part in it.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's fine. He delivers. He does everything. He does exactly what it says on the tin. Like there's, you're not going to get awards or plaudits for something like this kind of role, but it serves the purpose that the film needs it to serve. His part.
All right, shall I read Greenlights?
Please do.
All right, there's a bit of crossover here. I mean, they both came out the same year, but he mentions A Time to Kill and Lone Star in the same little passage. So he says, 2 weeks later, working on the set of Lone Star in Eagle Pass, Texas, in the full moon desert at midnight, I got a phone call. It was Joel Schumacher and John Grisham. I can't say his name. John Grisham. I'm going to have to practice that.
Joel Schumacher.
Yeah, I'm going to have to practice that for the next episode.
I think it's pretty hard to say those two names back to back, to be fair.
Maybe that's what it is, yeah. You want to be Jake Brigance? You're damn right I do. I ran off into the night until I was about a mile away from anyone. Then with tears in my eyes, I dropped to my knees, faced that full moon, extended my right hand up to it and said, thank you. And that's it. That's all the mention that Lone Star gets. So, yeah, I mean, his world was about A Time to Kill. There's a big passage before it in the book where he talks about the interview process and having to go through that a couple of times and him being nowhere near the potential lead for A Time to Kill. Like nobody had him in mind because he just wasn't known at that point. So clearly that was his focus around now. And maybe Lone Star was just a way to earn a bit of money whilst he was waiting to hear back about A Time to Kill. Yeah.
Again, I think I said this before we started recording, but all these films have come out in a certain order, but he filmed them in a different order, didn't he? So,
yeah.
So I don't know when. Maybe this is earlier on. Maybe this is closer to Texas Chainsaw. Maybe close to Boyfriend's Back. I'm not sure. Maybe. Again, you probably have more information from Greenlights or
yeah. From that, it feels like it's roughly where it's come out. I think this one.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he's sort of done all these very slight roles, but again, this is another slight role, isn't it?
Yeah. Work is work. You got to take it, even if it's small.
Yeah.
You know, he's still getting paid for it. He's working. He's being seen. You know, like
He didn't have to go far. He grew up an hour away. I read he grew up an hour away from where this was filmed. So
there you go. Then.
If he was back home, he didn't have to travel far to get to work.
That might be why W.E. Slaughter's in this as well. Again,
well, yes,
quite close nearby. Might as well just hire him. Again, very small role, but yeah, makes sense. Yeah, again, like you said, Time to Kill is a big one, which I was talking about how good Joel Schumacher's filmography was the other day on my podcast with Mike, because he brought him up, and I was like, people only remember him for Batman and Robin now, which is a real shame because he's got a banging filmography, including all the stuff, Lost Boys, Time to Kill, and Phone Booth, and whatever else you want to bring up, but. Yeah, it's a real shame that people just always go to, Batman and Robin when they always talk about him. Real shame.
Well, I'll do some championing of him in the next episode.
You better do, or I'll put you in the Texas desert.
Wow. Okay.
That's how strongly I feel about Joel Schumacher.
Yeah, I can tell. Jesus. All right, let's see how Dara feels about Lone Star, shall we?
Yeah.
They say it's timeless. The way this film balances two timelines is stunning. Its use of McConaughey's character and performance is faultless. Sometimes people wonder whether a book or a film adaptation is better. Well, here we have what might be the closest we'll ever get to the perfect film-novel hybrid. A case study in flawless storytelling and restraint. They like it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think they're giving probably Matthew McConaughey a lot of credit. But yeah, I think that's right. I think that's an accurate review for the film itself. And again, Matthew McConaughey is Matthew McConaughey, and he delivers here Matthew McConaughey. So again, you can't really be disappointed.
I mean, it was well regarded when it came out, wasn't it, Lone Star? And then when it had its release, not that long ago, I don't think.
Criterion Collection, I think maybe.
Yeah, it went through another kind of wave of really popular reviews and people really singing its praises. And I think probably because, as we've said many times here, it's still relevant. The stuff it talks about was relevant then. It was relevant in the 30 years prior in the other timeline, and it's still relevant, nearly 30 years again later now. So
yeah, as we were saying before we recorded, they're talking about the last line of the film, or one of the last lines is "Forget the Alamo," which again is kind of Chinatown-esque as well, kind of a reference to that. But they talk about the Alamo and how Mexicans were fighting Mexicans for the right to be owned as slaves by white people. And with the way the Latino or Latinx vote went in the election with Trump recently, a lot of them voted for Trump in massive numbers, which is kind of fascinating to me and scary as well. But yeah, very interesting though.
Okay, I've got one more. Michael Tulloch says, no expectations, but I was pretty disappointed. A very long 2.5 hours with an underbaked and predictable core mystery and far too many plot lines. It makes an attempt at presenting a pretty interesting perspective on race relations and its history at the Texas southern border that ultimately felt a bit hokey and on the nose, like several other 90s Hollywood films trying to deal with these issues often did, in a formula that eventually fizzled out with the infamous Best Picture winner Crash in 2004. Highlights were... That's my review of Crash.
Okay, fair enough.
Highlights were Matthew McConaughey and Frances McDormand, who get a criminally small amount of screen time, as they felt like the only people doing anything remotely interesting on screen. I like Chris Cooper, but boy, his performance was dry, as was pretty much the rest of the film.
Oh, strong words.
Not a fan.
Yeah. Again, I came in, for the mystery, so I can understand the disappointment there.
Maybe it's somebody that's done that. Yeah.
Yeah, and what else did they say? They said that, and it was long, and it was
long, too many plots. Yeah,
I
tried to have something to say, but all these films around this time had something to say.
Bloody
woke movies.
I don't think. Yeah, woke. It's all woke. People have opinions about the world we live in. Oh, the establishment is bad. Oh, it's doing things. Yeah. I kind of know what he means by, again, the mystery. I know what they mean by maybe too many plot lines. We talked about the Joe Morton one, but again, I think that is integral. It needs to be there, but I thought there was maybe a different way to tell that particular strand of the story. But yeah, I disagree. I don't think it's dry. I think it's yeah, like he says, it's kind of this thing that's kind of quite, relevant, or not relevant, but these kind of tropes he's talking about with these other kind of similar films. I disagree. I don't think it's like that at all. I don't think I've not quite seen a film like this. I've not quite seen this kind of story be told in this certain way. So I can understand where those kind of criticisms are coming from, but I don't agree with them.
I mean, obviously, I pick, and Matthew McConaughey mentioned again, but I pick out reviews specifically because they mention McConaughey because of the purpose of this podcast. But I think we'd be remiss not to, and we've mentioned her a little bit, but Elizabeth Penner is fantastic, and she's easily the best thing in this. I would have said,
absolutely,
from my perspective. Totally buy her and all her roles that she plays as teacher, mother, like daughter, lover, all these kind of different facets to her character. I totally buy, and obviously, sadly, she's passed away and she's not able to continue that wonderful run. But I think, I don't think I would feel I'd done this movie and her performance justice if I didn't say that at some point.
No, I agree. I think she's fantastic. And again, like there's a lot of stuff in here that we've not really talked about or gone into much detail about, like her dealing with her son and her daughter and her relationships with that, and then the mother, and her role as a teacher, and her kind of being a peacemaker as well with all the other parents going, like, again, there are people going, this is woke, basically. Back in 1996, how dare you take away my history? Because they even talk about like statues being pulled down and things like that, and it's like, fucking hell, this is just like last year, with all these racist statues being pulled down and stuff like that.
You mentioned banned books. I mean, like,
yeah, exactly. Well, and people
they're
say
trying to ban her teaching of everybody's history here,
the accurate history, and then they go, well, these people can have this, why can't we have this? And it's like fucking hell. It's like, again, this 1996, much like the 30 years before the film in the past, this film is just as relevant. This has a river connecting to our present. That's how powerful this film is. That it's almost, what was it, 30 years old, over 30 years old now.
Just about it is,
it's the same amount of time we're talking about it now that Deeds and Chris Cooper, the Deeds boys, have between them, and it's still relevant. It still works. It still plays. Again, not perfect, and we have some issues with it, but I think on the whole, it is very, very strong as a film about what it's trying to say.
I love that. So a strong film by itself, but how strong within McConaughey's filmography? The time has come. You must now decide.
I still haven't really decided. That's the problem. Again, like, I know you've had, like I said, you've had a shit run of films recently.
Yeah.
Again,
no spoilers for you, really. Even though the last episode hasn't come out, but you can probably guess where.
I think even Mike
and Glory Days were rated.
Yeah, I think Max has definitely inferred, and Mike, even on the podcast we did, was like, "Yeah, I did Glory Days," and it was like, okay, I get. I feel what you're inferring there, Mike. So yeah, I think I had to hunt down a version for him on YouTube. I managed to find a copy for him because he's like, I can't find it anywhere. I was like, don't worry, I got you. Found it. So let's have a look.
Digital dealer.
So let's have a think. Let's have a think. So we've got Completist Only, Worth Catching. And what's the essential?
Classic.
That was it. There's the three. I should have remembered. It's the C's.
3 C's.
All the C's. I should have remembered. Yes. Now, if I was judging it as a film itself, I'd probably say it's going into the classic for me. I think it is, as a film on its own, as a film, as a piece of art. I think it's veering definitely into classic territory for me. I wouldn't want to say, in regards to McConaughey, I don't want to say it's completist only. Again, people might think that because, again, the amount of screen time he has, like his character is relevant. It is relevant to this story. It is important. His performance adds a physical layer, and we can again, it kind of demystifies the character a little bit, brings him down to this kind of human level, which we need to do by the end of this story. We can't be the legendary gunslinger character. That's the myth. We need the truth, and that's what Chris Cooper's character is after. So we need a physical presence for that, and again, he serves that purpose. So I'm going to fall on that it's worth catching because, again, I think it's a really good film. I think McConaughey is in it. I think he is. Certainly is. But he is good in the role. And again, it is all about that character. But again, I wouldn't go into it thinking you're going to see a great McConaughey performance or he's going to be there for a long time or a lot of screen time. I think if you're going in thinking, because unfortunately a lot of the DVDs and posters are like Matthew McConaughey. Matthew McConaughey, like they've got the image there. He's the first head you see. He's the first name you read. Do not go in thinking this is a Matthew McConaughey film or a Matthew McConaughey project. It is not. And, just go in and enjoy it for what it is. He's there. You can appreciate him, but yeah, so I'm going to go with it's worth catching.
All right, run broken. Thank you, sir. All right, so what's going with you? This is going to come out. This is a New Year's treat for everybody. So this will be out at the start of the new year.
New Year,
2025.
all right. So
what is happening for you in the new year?
What is happening in the new year? So we've got a new project on the horizon. Me and Comics in Motion, Max and Dave are teaming up again. So we're going to be releasing our Page of Apocalypse, which because we're not getting another X-Men show this year, which was initially planned, but there's controversy with what's going on with that, and I'm not going to go into it here. But we decided I wanted to do a bit more comic book stuff. I also wanted stuff that I didn't necessarily have to edit. So I thought, why don't we do one that's a video? And, Dave can have it on Comics in Motion, Chris and Dave, and then I can have it on here as well. And wherever people want to listen, it'll be there. So, yeah, we're going to be going through the entire, if you're not familiar, X-Men has this big, huge event in the 90s, very popular, very well regarded, called the Age of Apocalypse, which is a kind of alternate timeline, parallel universe kind of timeline where Xavier is killed by his own son in the past, and Apocalypse emerges early before all the kind of X teams are there to defeat him, and takes over America. And the universe doesn't quite come together as it normally did, the Marvel Universe. So it's a kind of alternate take on all these kind of characters and their relationships. So yeah, we're going to do that. And that's going to probably take us throughout the entire year, the way I've kind of broken it up. And then you'll still get the Patreon exclusives that are coming out and that are chosen by yourself as one of the patrons. So yeah, so that's going to be your first thing. So it's going to be that. And then we're going to follow that up not long after that with Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Dan Keatis is going to join me. We're going to talk about Kenneth Branagh's Vanity Project and see. I've not seen it for a while, but I remember liking it. But we'll see what I feel this time round. So yeah, so it's going to be an interesting new year. Lots of good stuff happening. Busy, probably busier than I've ever been before, I'm sure, even though I don't want to be sometimes. I'm sure there'll be a lot of guest spots and things, Disney discussions, sharing the silver screen, whatever else I'm doing, Forbidden Worlds, and yeah, it's going to be a big year, but I'm looking forward to it. It's been a really good year this year, and all the Patreon stuff has been going really well, a lot more consistent. We've got more patrons now than ever, so yeah, it's all going really well.
Brilliant. Lots to look forward to, mate. Thank you so much.
All that's left for me to say is a thank you to everyone that is listening and partaking in this journey with me through the reconnaissance. That was Lone Star. Next up in a fortnight, I'm joined by the hosts of This American Wife podcast to discuss Eminem's ascendant performance as Jake Brigance and Joel Schumacher's A Time to Kill, for those that are watching along. Until next time, be excellent to each other and make sure you take the time to treat yourself too. I am Jack signing off. Yippee-ki-yay, movie lovers. cut